The rain hadn't stopped for hours, and the city streets looked like a patchwork of broken mirrors, each puddle reflecting the fractured lights of Carver City. Friday nights usually pulsed with noise, bars spilling laughter, cars honking in traffic, neon signs humming over diners, but tonight the city seemed muted. The air carried a strange anticipation, as if the skyline itself was holding its breath. Detective Evelyn Ross sat at her desk in the precinct, a half-finished case report glowing on her computer screen. The rest of the homicide unit had gone home. Only the hum of the vending machine and the clack of the ceiling fan kept her company. She sipped her third cup of coffee, the bitterness biting her tongue, when the desk sergeant poked his head through her door. "Detective, you might want to hear this," he said, holding out a small portable radio. Ross frowned at 11:30 on a Friday night. "What is it?" "Another prank call. Just listen." The radio hissed with static, then a voice emerged, calm, measured, masculine. "Good evening, Carver City. You know me by now. The clock strikes 12 soon, and with it, justice arrives. At exactly 12:15, a man will die at the corner of 7th and Halloway. Watch the neon sign flicker and watch the truth bleed. Don't be late, and remember, this is not murder. This is judgment." Ross froze, her grip tightening around the radio. "Christ," she muttered. It was the fourth night in a row, 4 nights, 4 murders, each one announced in advance, live on an old AM station that no one had cared about for years, until now. Each broadcast detailed the location and time, and every prediction had come true. She grabbed her coat. "Notify dispatch. We're moving, now." The streets blurred past as Ross drove her unmarked sedan through the rain. Patrol units were already heading to the corner of 7th and Halloway, a narrow street lined with crumbling tenements and a half-abandoned strip of businesses. A once bustling diner's neon sign still buzzed faintly, the pink open flickering like a dying heartbeat. When she arrived, officers were stretching yellow tape across the alley. Their radios crackled nervously, the entire scene tense with the knowledge that the killer never lied. "Detective Ross," Officer Ramirez called out, jogging toward her, rain dripping from her cap. "We've locked down the block, but at exactly 12:15, a scream sliced through the night. Everyone spun toward the alley behind the diner. Ross sprinted, her boots splashing through puddles, hand already on her gun. The beam of her flashlight cut through the dark. There, slumped against the graffiti stained wall, was a man in a tailored gray suit. His throat had been opened cleanly, blood soaking into the wet concrete. His lifeless eyes stared up at the flickering neon. Pinned to his chest with a silver knife was a torn page from a book. Ross leaned closer, her gloves brushing the damp paper. It was from an old legal text, underlined in jagged red ink, "The guilty shall not escape judgment." Her jaw tightened. Same as before, each victim had been marked with a piece of writing. Pages ripped from books about justice, law, or morality. The killer wasn't just choosing victims, he was staging something. The alley filled with chatter, officers taking statements, the forensic team unpacking equipment, cameras flashing, but Ross's focus drifted to the sound in her ear. Her radio crackled again. Not police chatter this time. That same chilling voice. "Lev, Detective Ross, are you listening? You run, you chase, you arrive too late. Tomorrow night, we play again. Midnight, I'll be waiting." Her blood ran cold. The killer wasn't speaking to the city anymore. He was speaking directly to her. She slammed her radio off, but the echo of his words clung to her. She turned to Ramirez. "We need a trace on that broadcast. Every unit, every resource. I want the station, the transmitter, the goddamn toaster oven if it's carrying that signal." Ramirez hesitated. "We already tried, Detective. The FCC, our tech guys, even a few favors with the feds. The signal it bounces, they can't pin it down." Ross exhaled sharply, rain dripping off her brow. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just a killer. He was meticulous, methodical, and far ahead of them. She stared at the victim again. The neat suit, the Rolex untouched, the precise cut across the throat. This wasn't random violence. This was a message. But why her? Why did he call her out on the airwaves? Back at the precinct an hour later, Ross pinned photos to her board. 4 victims in 4 days, all men, all professionals, an attorney, a banker, a judge, and now this one, still unidentified. Each one labeled with the killer's macabre calling card, Justice, the pattern gnawed at her. The victims weren't just random names pulled from a hat. They were connected somehow, but the link was buried deep, hidden under years of city secrets. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Tick-tock, detective, midnight never sleeps. Ross gritted her teeth, tossing the phone on the desk. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the board until the faces blurred together. Somewhere out there, in the rain-soaked streets of Carver City, a man with a voice like velvet and hands like blades was watching her, and tomorrow night he would speak again. Morning came gray and reluctant, as though the city itself mourned the blood spilled hours earlier. Carver City Police Headquarters buzzed with reporters outside, microphones waving like bayonets, hungry for sound bites. 4 murders in 4 nights, all announced on the radio before they happened. The city wanted answers, and Detective Evelyn Ross didn't have any yet. She pushed past the cameras, ignoring the shouted questions. "Detective Ross, is there a serial killer? Do you have any suspects? What does the message mean?" Inside the homicide unit, the air smelled of burnt coffee and stress. Forensics had been working through the night, piecing together the scene from 7th and Holloway. Photos were scattered across Ross's desk. The victim slumped under neon light, the knife pinning the torn law page to his chest, the Rolex still shining on his wrist. Captain Marcus Doyle, broad-shouldered and perpetually scowling, loomed over her desk. His tie was crooked, his eyes bloodshot. "You look like hell," he muttered. "So do you." Ross shot back. Doyle ignored the jab, dropping a folder onto her desk. Victim's name is Alan Whitmore, corporate lawyer, big firm downtown, married, 2 kids in private school. No record, no enemies that we know of. At least none who'd carve his throat in an alley. Ross flipped through the photos in the file. A family portrait, Whitmore smiling stiffly with a woman and 2 blonde children, the normal life, the polished surface. But killers didn't pick their victims randomly. This man had skeletons somewhere. "And the page?" Ross asked. Doyle rubbed his temples, "Same as the others, pulled from a book on law. Foundations of American Justice, out of print since the 70s. Our lab says the ink markings are consistent with the other notes. Same red marker, same heavy hand." Ross leaned back. 4 men now. An attorney, a banker, a judge, and another attorney. A pattern was taking shape. People connected to the system of law, finance, judgment, people who held power. The question wasn't why they were killed. It was why the killer needed an audience. Later that morning, Ross sat across from a radio technician in a cramped FCC office. The man, thin with wire, frame glasses, tapped nervously at his laptop. "We've been tracking the signal since the first broadcast," he explained. "But it's not coming from a standard tower. Whoever this guy is, he's bouncing his transmission across multiple relays, hijacking frequencies for a few minutes, then vanishing. Think of it like a ghost moving through the wires. By the time we catch a trace, he's already gone." Ross crossed her arms. "You're telling me someone with a home setup is outsmarting federal tech. Not just someone," the technician said. "Someone who knows broadcasting inside and out. This isn't amateur hour. The voice, the clarity, the range, it's professional equipment. Studio, grade. He could be anywhere in the city." Ross drummed her fingers against the desk. "And you can't triangulate it. Not fast enough unless..." He hesitated. "Unless you bait him. Force him to talk longer. Keep him on the air. Then maybe, just maybe, we could pin the signal down." Ross thought about the words from last night's broadcast. "Detective Ross, are you listening? The bastard wanted her attention. Maybe she could use that against him." By afternoon, Ross sat in Whitmore's upscale apartment. His widow, Clara, sat across from her on a white leather sofa, tissues crumpled in her hands. The penthouse overlooked the city skyline, all glass and shine, far removed from the blood in the alleys. "He was late last night," Clara whispered, her voice raw. Alan never stayed out that late. Said he had a meeting, some client, but he wouldn't say who. Ross nodded gently. Did he seem worried, nervous? Clara hesitated. Not worried, angry, he said. He said some people were finally going to get what they deserved. I thought it was just work stress. You know how lawyers are. Ross's pen hovered over her notebook. Angry, deserved, words that mirrored the killer's broadcast. Mrs. Whitmore, Ross asked carefully, do you know if your husband ever worked with Judge Charles Finley? Clara's eyes widened. The one who was killed 2 nights ago. Yes, Alan handled several of his private financial cases. Why? Ross's pulse quickened. There it was, a link. Back at the precinct, Ross spread files across her desk. Judge Finley, Banker Harris, Attorney Whitmore. Their paths crossed in courtrooms, in deals, in backroom negotiations. She highlighted connections with Neon Inc., building a web of names. It wasn't just random victims. It was a circle, a group. Men tied together by power and influence. Men who, maybe, had crossed the wrong person. Ramirez leaned over her shoulder. Looks like our guy isn't just killing at random. He's hunting a list. Ross nodded slowly. A list. And broadcasting it like a goddamn radio drama. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Midnight. 10th and Briarwood. Don't be late. No voice this time. Just text. Her blood ran cold. The killer was changing the rules. Night fell heavy and fast. Rain drummed against Ross's windshield as she parked near 10th and Briarwood, a shadowy street lined with shuttered storefronts and a half-collapsed warehouse. Patrol cars idled nearby, their lights dimmed to avoid drawing attention. Snipers had been stationed on rooftops. They weren't going to let the killer slip away this time. At exactly midnight, the radios came alive. Good evening, Carver City. The guilty gather and judgment comes. Detective Ross, you've brought friends tonight. How thoughtful, but you can't stop what's already written. At 12:20 you'll find him. Look under the broken clock. Ross cursed, grabbing her flashlight. She sprinted into the warehouse, boots echoing across the cracked floor. The massive grandfather clock leaned against the far wall, its glass shattered, gears rusted, and beneath it, another body. This one was different. Not a man in a suit, not a judge or a banker. A young man, barely 20, face pale, eyes wide open in terror. Pinned to his shirt was another page, this one from a philosophy book. Truth is the daughter of time, not of authority. Ross swallowed hard. The killer had shifted his pattern. This victim wasn't power or wealth. This was something else. Her radio hissed again, that smooth, cold voice curling into her ear. Detective Ross, you're learning, but you're still too slow. Tomorrow, the city will truly listen. Then static. Ross stared down at the boy's body, her hands trembling. The rules were changing. The killer's game was widening, and somewhere in the static, his voice was smiling. By sunrise, the headlines screamed across every newspaper stand, every website banner, every radio frequency. Killer changes pattern, youth slain in warehouse. The murder of the young man beneath the broken clock had shaken Carver City more than the previous killings combined. A banker or a judge dying in an alley made citizens uneasy, but a 20-year-old kid. That made them terrified. Detective Evelyn Ross hadn't slept. Her office was littered with half-drained coffee cups and crime scene photos. The board on her wall looked like a spiderweb spun in neon ink. Faces, timelines, red strings tying names together. Yet the connection still felt incomplete, as if some invisible thread held the truth just out of reach. Captain Doyle stormed into the room, his jaw tight, eyes bloodshot. Ross, the mayor's on my ass. The press is circling like vultures. He wants results. Yesterday. Ross rubbed her temples. You think I'm not aware of that? 4 nights, 5 bodies, and he's announcing them like a goddamn radio host. He's playing us. Doyle slammed a newspaper down on her desk. The front page showed the dead boy's pale face, captioned, "The voice before midnight strikes again." They've given him a name, Doyle growled. The voice before midnight. You know what that means. He's not just a killer now. He's a goddamn celebrity. Ross stared at the headline, bile rising in her throat. That's exactly what the killer wanted. Not just to punish, not just to murder. He wanted an audience, a city forced to listen. At mid-morning, Ross and Officer Ramirez visited the dead boy's parents. Their home was small, humble, on the edge of the city. His mother wept openly, clutching his photo. His father, a construction worker with hands like stone, sat stiff and silent, eyes blazing with grief. He wasn't supposed to be there, his mother whispered. He was supposed to be home. He said he was meeting someone for a part-time job, that's all. Ross's brow furrowed. Did he say who, a name? The father's voice was low, bitter. Said it was some man who promised him cash. Said he only had to meet him once. Now he's dead. Ross exchanged a glance with Ramirez. This wasn't coincidence. The killer had lured the boy, staged him as a victim. He wasn't just hunting the powerful anymore. He was expanding the narrative, showing that anyone could bleed for his so-called justice. By afternoon, Ross sat again in the cramped FCC office, leaning over the technician's shoulder. The man's hands flew across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling down the screen. "We got lucky last night," he said. "The broadcast lasted longer than usual. Close to 90 seconds. I caught fragments of the signal before it bounced." Ross leaned closer. "And it originated from 3 possible zones: South Industrial, West Riverfront, or Midtown, but there's overlap. He could be using mobile equipment, a van even." Ross cursed under her breath. The city was too big, too noisy. Chasing a phantom through the airwaves felt impossible unless you bait him. The tech reminded her, keep him talking, make it personal. Ross clenched her fists. It was personal already. That evening, Ross sat in the precinct's radio room, staring at the old AM transmitter they'd repurposed. A plan had formed, reckless, dangerous, but maybe the only shot they had. "Detective, are you sure about this?" Ramirez asked, adjusting the headset. "No," Ross admitted, "but he wants me listening. Maybe it's time I spoke back." She leaned into the microphone, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "This is Detective Ross. You've had your fun. You've spilled enough blood. If you want me so badly, I'm here. Come find me." For a moment, only static answered. Then the voice, smooth as velvet, chilling as ice. "Ah, Detective, finally you speak. I was beginning to think you enjoyed only the chase, but words have power, don't they? Tonight, you'll learn just how much." The FCC tech gestured wildly, headphones pressed tight. Keep him talking, Ross gritted her teeth. "Why the boy, why change your pattern?" The voice chuckled softly. "Patterns are cages, Detective. Break them, and truth is free. The boy was a liar, just like the rest. You still think this is about power and money, but it's about something deeper. It's about cleansing, and tomorrow night, the city will hear the truth it's been hiding from." The line cut to static. The tech slammed his fist on the desk. "Damn it, too short. We almost had him." Ross removed her headset, her pulse racing. The killer had slipped again, but she'd rattled him enough to reveal one thing. Tomorrow night wasn't just another killing. It was going to be something bigger. That night, rain hammered the city. Ross sat in her car outside her apartment, staring at the glow of the dashboard clock. She should go inside, should sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Why call himself justice? Why the law books, the philosophy quotes? Why speak like a preacher on the airwaves? Her phone buzzed. Another text, the same unknown number. "Detective Ross, tomorrow the city listens, and you will decide who dies." Her blood froze. This wasn't just murder anymore. It was a game, and now she was no longer chasing the killer. She was part of his broadcast. The storm hit Carver City with a vengeance. Thunder cracked over the skyline, and sheets of rain turned the streets into rivers of flashing red and blue lights. By late evening, every household that still owned a radio had it tuned to the same AM station. No music, no commercials, just silence, waiting for the killer's next message. Detective Evelyn Ross sat in the command center of the precinct, eyes fixed on the clock. 11:57, 3 minutes to midnight. The room buzzed with tension, officers at their monitors, analysts glued to signal trackers, Captain Doyle pacing like a caged lion. "This is it," Doyle muttered. The bastard said the whole city would listen. If he's planning something big, we'd better be ready. Ross adjusted her headset, heart hammering. She wasn't sure what terrified her more, that another body would drop, or that the killer would use his broadcast to tear the city apart. At midnight, the radio hissed alive. "Good evening, Carver City. Tonight is not like the others. Tonight, I give you a choice. 2 lives, 2 liars, both guilty in their own ways. But only one may bleed, and the one to decide." The voice paused, savoring the silence. "Is you Detective Ross?" The room erupted in shouts, radios buzzing, analysts scrambling. Ross froze, blood draining from her face. The killer continued. "On the east side, at the old railway yard, you'll find a banker who built his fortune on broken families. On the west side, at the river docks, a man who hides behind a badge, taking bribes to look away. At 12:30, one of them dies, unless you choose which one deserves." Judgment static filled the air. Doyle slammed his fist against the table. "Got him, son of a. He's setting us up. He's forcing her into his game." Ross pulled off her headset, mind racing. 2 locations. 2 supposed victims, 30 minutes. If they split resources, maybe they could save both. But if the killer was watching, if he was waiting for her to move, it could all be a trap. "Captain," Ramirez said urgently, "units are already en route. But we don't have enough manpower to fully cover both." Ross's pulse thundered in her ears. The killer wasn't lying. Every night, his broadcasts had been precise, deadly. If she hesitated, someone would die, but if she chose, she would be complicit. They raced east first, sirens screaming through the rain. The old railway yard loomed in the distance, rusted tracks, graffiti, covered freight cars, shadows that swallowed the beams of their flashlights. Clear, an officer shouted, sweeping a boxcar. "Over here," another voice echoed. They found him, a man in a tailored suit, gagged and bound to the steel rails. His eyes bulged with terror as the team cut the ropes. A bomb vest clung to his chest, the timer blinking. 12:29. Jesus Christ, Ramirez gasped. "He wired him." Ross dropped to her knees, inspecting the device. She wasn't a bomb tech, but she knew one thing. There wasn't time. "Get him out of here now." She barked. Officers scrambled, hauling the man away. Her radio crackled again, the voice smooth as ever. "Ah, so you chose the banker. How merciful, but detective. Mercy for one means judgment for the other." Ross's stomach twisted. The river docks. They sped west, but the rain slowed everything. The streets flooded, tires skidding on the slick asphalt. By the time they reached the docks, the air already smelled of blood. There, under the skeletal cranes and shipping containers, lay a uniformed cop. His badge glistened in the rain, his throat slashed open, chest pinned with another page torn from a book. Ross bent down, the paper trembling in her hands. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Her heart sank. The killer had forced her hand, framed her in his narrative. The city would see her as the one who chose, who lived and who died. Back at the precinct, the press was relentless. Headlines already blared across screens. Detective saves banker, cop slain. Is Ross responsible? Conspiracy theories flooded social media. The voice before midnight had turned the city against its own protectors. Captain Doyle slammed his office door. He's got the whole damn city dancing to his tune. If this keeps up, we're going to have riots in the streets. Ross stared at the board of victims, her reflection fractured in the glass. The killer wasn't just a murderer anymore. He was a puppeteer, pulling strings of fear, forcing her into the spotlight, and she hated herself for realizing something she didn't want to admit. A part of him was winning. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed again, another unknown text. "Tomorrow, no choices, only truth. Bring your city, detective. Midnight is judgment." Ross sat in the dark, the words glowing cold against the screen. She knew what was coming wasn't just another killing, it would be a spectacle. The voice before midnight wasn't done yet, and tomorrow the whole city would be his stage. The next night, Carver City was silent. Too silent. Every bar had shut early, every diner emptied, every radio tuned to the same cursed AM frequency. Families huddled together in living rooms, the glow of static filling their homes like an electric fog. They weren't waiting for music or weather reports. They were waiting for him. Detective Evelyn Ross stood on the roof of the precinct, raincoat clinging to her shoulders, headset pressed tight against her ears. Below, the city sprawled in flickering neon and wet streets, a chessboard where the pieces had already been placed. Captain Doyle's voice came through her earpiece. "We've got units spread across all 3 sectors. Industrial, Midtown, Riverfront. If he tries to pull another stunt, we'll be ready." Ross didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the glowing red hand of her wristwatch. 11:59. Her heart felt like a drum inside her ribs. Tonight wasn't just another killing. Tonight was the finale. At midnight, the radio came alive. "Good evening, Carver City. Tonight, the curtain falls. Tonight, judgment is not whispered. It is shouted. Tonight, the guilty are unmasked." The voice was louder than ever, confident, almost triumphant. "For weeks you have watched liars fall. You have heard their secrets bleed into the pavement. But what you have not heard is why. Allow me to enlighten you." Across the city, people leaned closer to their radios. Years ago, a trial shook this city, a case buried in corruption, a banker, a judge, an attorney, all conspiring to free a guilty man. They sold their souls and they sold the truth. The man they freed destroyed lives, mine among them. Ross's breath caught. She whispered into her mic, "He's giving us motive. Track this now. Every second counts." The FCC tech spoke urgently in her ear. "We've got him longer tonight." Signals bouncing, but we're close, narrowing to Midtown. Stand by. The killer's voice rolled on, sermon-like. "The system failed, justice failed, and so I became the voice it denied. I became the hand it lacked, and tonight, Detective Ross, I give you the final truth. The last guilty man still walks free, and he waits, inside your precinct." The rooftop erupted in shouts. Officers scrambled, radios buzzing chaos. Ross's stomach dropped like stone. Inside their own walls, she bolted downstairs, through the stairwell, into the buzzing command center. Every officer's eyes turned to her, fear etched across their faces. "Search the building," Doyle barked, "top to bottom now." But Ross already knew. She didn't know how, didn't know why, but the knot in her stomach pulled her toward one desk in particular, the desk of Officer Ramirez. Ramirez stood frozen as Ross approached, rain dripping from her coat, gun raised but trembling. "Tell me it isn't you," Ross whispered. Ramirez's eyes flickered, not with fear, but with something colder. Resignation, and then her radio hissed, and the voice came again. But this time it wasn't disembodied, it was hers. Clever, detective, but too late, as always. Gasps filled the room. Ramirez, her partner, her shadow these past weeks, was the voice before midnight. Why? Ross's voice cracked, her weapon shaking in her hands. Why the lies, the games, the killings? Ramirez's lips curved into something between a smile and a snarl. "Because I was there, Ross. I watched them destroy my family, my father's company, his life. Gone because of their corruption. The banker, the judge, the lawyers. They made a deal and he took the fall. He killed himself in a cell while they walked free." Her eyes glistened with fury. "You think justice is paperwork and trials? No, justice is balance, and I gave this city balance." Doyle drew his gun. "Drop the act, Ramirez, you're done." But Ramirez only laughed. The sound was wrong. Bitter, broken. "You can't silence the truth. The city has heard me. They'll always hear me." Then Ross noticed. The small transmitter on Ramirez's belt, light blinking red. She was broadcasting this moment live. The entire city was listening. Ross lowered her gun slightly, her throat tight. "If you really wanted justice, you wouldn't have killed that boy. He wasn't part of your crusade. He was innocent." Ramirez's face twitched, the mask faltering. "He lied to me. He promised he'd help, but he betrayed me." "No." Ross pressed, voice shaking but firm. "You killed him because the pattern was slipping, because you needed control. You're not justice. You're just another liar with blood on your hands." For a heartbeat, silence. The rain pounded against the windows, and then Ramirez's eyes hardened. "If I fall, I'll take this whole city with me." Her hand darted to the transmitter. Ross fired. The shot cracked like thunder. Ramirez collapsed, the transmitter clattering to the floor, sparking into silence. The room was still. Officers stared, shock frozen on their faces. Doyle's gun was still raised, but his hands trembled. Ross knelt beside Ramirez's body, the voice that had haunted the city now silenced forever. Her partner, her betrayer. The FCC tech's voice came faintly through her earpiece. Signal's dead. It's over. But as Ross stared at the blood spreading across the floor, she wasn't sure it was. Because the city had listened, and somewhere in the quiet corners of Carver City, people were whispering the name they had given the killer. The voice before midnight, and whispers, she knew, could live far longer than voices. Days later, Ross stood on the same rooftop, dawn breaking over the skyline. Reporters called her a hero. The city tried to move on, but she knew better. Justice was never clean. Justice always left scars. And in the shadows of Carver City, scars bled stories. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.